Well, hello. So my name is Jonathan Mall. My friends call me Jonathan. My background is neuropsychology. Basically, you see me here with one of the first wireless EEG electrodes that were dry and they hurt like hell. I have studied brains using EEG, MRI, TMS, lots of different visualization and manipulation techniques. Overall, those techniques are extremely expensive and also very slow. So I know a lot, I have studied a lot about persuasion and how people work, but also two other things that are important. One is I've done competitive debating over 5 years, so that means on an academic level going to Paris, Moscow, Oxford, all over the world to debate very smart people. And to do it all on a very rational level, right? So you have a panel of a jury of peers, academics, and they rate your arguments based on their content, their rational, academic, deep content. Well, at the same time, because that's not all there is to persuasion, I've been doing this. Learning from the best, giving talks about and teaching people how to persuade people of the opposite sex. For example, on the street, where, as you can imagine, you do not use a lot of academic, rational content because there's no time. You really need to get people on an extremely emotional, quick, first impression kind of level. And I'm here to give you two things. One, of course, yes, how do we measure stuff? But also, why do we do it the way that we do it? Because what I'm going to tell you is that these three things are essentially all the same. Whether it's about persuading people to fall in love with you, to sell a product, or to go to war, it all relies on the same principles that I'm going to teach you, or try to teach you. I'm just a little bit curious right now because obviously this is personal, economic, and societal interest, and I kind of wonder about you guys, where your interests lie. So who of you is really interested in politics and going to war things? Hands up. One person. Wow. Okay. And the second one, the economic, being able to sell more products. That's way more. And the first one, being more persuasive towards your fellow men or women. 0. So that I guess that means that all of you are interested in that because I cannot imagine that you are not. Honestly, I can't. But okay. Congruent with your study, I guess, so far. So that indeed, combining those things, combining the underlying knowledge about why these things work, that's NeuroFlash. Now, let me give you an example. They were selling furniture on a website, and they would change the background to show clouds or to show coins. And when the clouds were in the background, people would actually search and buy the more comfortable couches that were more expensive. And when they had the coins in the background, people would go for the cheap stuff. And funny enough, they didn't notice that influence of the background on their purchasing behavior. Second example, flowers. If you have a date and you put flowers on the table while you're having the date, your chance of having a successful date is higher. That is also illustrated by this. When you asked people for a phone number in the mall, and a poor student had to do that over 600 times, very poor student, he actually did it in front of a shoe shop, a cake shop, and a flower shop like this. So who thinks the flower shop is the most successful one? Smart people. I did prime you with that, though. But what is better, the cake or the shoe shop? Bear in mind that the guy who asked was a guy asking girls. Who says shoes is better? Most of the guys think that. It's actually not right. It's it's 15%. Wait, let me see. No, it's 11% shoe shop, 15% cake shop, and up to 20 to 25%, 24% to be exact, in front of the flower shop. Okay. So if you want to do that, do it with flowers. But why? Why does this work? And if you listen closely, by the end of this talk, I will tell you exactly why this works. But first, we need to do a little bit of groundwork. I need to tell you why memory consolidation is extremely important and what associations mean for your life and for all these different fields that I've shown you. So let's start with the consolidation. I need you guys to get out your pens or your phones, something that you can use to write something down. Everybody set? Good. So you don't need to write anything down while you see the next slides, but you need to do it at the end. So what you will get is letters, followed by mathematical equations, very simple ones. And all you have to do for the mathematical equation, so a letter would be like this, right? And a mathematical equation would look like this. When you see the mathematical equation, solve it, say whether it is true or not. Once you've solved it, lift your hand. All right? If you understand, lift your hand. A few people understand. Very good. Okay. Ready? At the end, remember all the letters in sequence. Got it? Let's go. Hands up if you solved it. And don't write anything down yet, right? And now write it down. What was the sequence of letters you have just seen? Write it down in order. Okay? So the correct sequence of letters was this. Who got it exactly right? No one? Okay, so let's go through the list, okay? So who got the first letter right? Hands up. Oh, that's almost all of you guys. Second one, keep your hands up if you're still right. Q, F, O, R, D, and N. How many people got N right? The last one? Okay, a bit less than I expected. Because what you see in the back is the actual recall of most people at a task like this, where you see primacy effects and recency effects, meaning the first things in a sequence are very salient. You can remember those, and the last things as well. The most likely explanation for this effect is the amount of interference in between. So when you first see a letter, you've never seen a letter, there's nothing that came before it. The last one, there's nothing that comes after, so you have less interference. But it is extremely important to get this concept, because that means that whenever you are presented with information, whenever there's a situation of any kind, the first and the last thing in that interaction is very important. Like you have a relationship, your first time that you saw that person and the horrible breakup, those are the two things that you remember. The stuff in between, not so much. So this really makes part of this forgetting curve, because we all know, you're students, the more you practice, for example, like if you get that sequence and you would do that every day, very likely those would be your last words. You don't want that either, but you want to memorize stuff repeatedly that is important to you. Like at university, there's an exam, so you want to study for that exam, maybe read the content a couple of times. And as you can see, that helps. So when you just do it at one time, you're going to forget it after about 6 days in this case. But then if you repeat the exposure, well, you're going to remember it better, more and more, so this forgetting curve gets shallower every time. So obviously then, something that you have experienced a lot will be very readily available to you. And that is important because all of that makes part of your total understanding of the world. So let's test your total understanding of the world with the following question. In the US, do you think it is more likely to be hit by lightning or to be killed in a school shooting? Who thinks it's more likely to be hit by lightning? Hands up. And who thinks it's more likely to be killed in the shooting? Hands up. Yeah, so most of you are completely wrong. it is 10 times more likely to get hit by lightning than it is to get killed in a school shooting. But then again, why were you all so wrong? I believe the main reason is that I said in the US. Because whenever you hear any kind of news from the US, it's very salient, Columbine, all these other horrible shootings where people die. So our brain works by basically telling you what is easy to come up with, and then you think that is more likely. So it is more easy for you to think of examples of those school shootings than it is of examples of the lightning striking, and hence you overestimate the likelihood of the school shootings. You can actually see this in data too. So this is the Google Trends page where you can see the amount of people searching for school shootings or lightning strikes. Obviously, school shootings much more prevalent. And I think those lightning strikes were actually when the lightning was hitting a plane. And this is really interesting because one of the fundamental tenets of neurology is that cells that fire together wire together. Well, it's a bit more complicated, to be honest. Indeed, it's actually spike timing dependent plasticity, which means that it's also important what comes first and what comes after. But luckily, for the how we process information is usually sequential, like if you read a sentence, and then all of these elements from the sentence would come in succession until you reach a dot, and then even then still you're going to read the paragraph, etc. But what I mean is, when things are activated at the same time, you read the article about the US, about the school shooting, then those things become connected. And then I present you with US, and you get that image, that idea immediately. When I say US right now, what is the first thing that you guys are thinking about? Trump. That's good, because he's going to come up later. In any case, let's take a closer look then at how this looks like, how this association network that gets created by you being part of this world, how that actually looks like in the brain, or what is our best estimation of how that looks like. So here you see a recent Nature study. I hope you can see that. It's a big brain, and there's lots of words in it that have colors. So basically, they put them in a scanner, and they read a story to them, a story that was full of words. And whenever a certain word, like top, was mentioned, this whole green area would light up. So basically, this represents and illustrates the semantic network. I tell you US, and then Trump, and maybe school shootings, etc. That whole cloud of associations gets activated. And this is extremely predictable, so much so that I'm now going to test it with you. So all of you guys, please close your eyes. Okay, and now everyone who has an even age, open your eyes. And close them again. And now everyone with an uneven age, open your eyes. And close them again. And now everyone, open your eyes, and please complete this word. It's an English word. Okay. All right. So hands up who has solved this with soap, and hands leave them up. Hands up who solved it with soup. And now keep them up. Keep them up. Everybody who saw this and had soap, take your hand down. Everybody who saw this and did soup, take your hand down. So everybody who has their hands up should have seen this and did soup and this and did soap. Am I correct? Perfect. Well, obviously, those two images were extremely strongly associated with these two concepts. So by priming you, I gave all of you this stimulus, and you solved it in the way that I previously primed you. And I think this is really the fundamental, illustration of how this semantic network works in everyday life. And I really have to say that it is extremely frustrating, having done this for so long, that your perception of how the world works and how you compute everything in it feels so logical, and you're so much in control of all these things. But you're really not. It is so easy to manipulate you and people in general with the right kind of priming and putting them in situations where, very reliable, you have certain reactions that just come out. It's not your fault. It's because you're part of this world that has predictable patterns, and those patterns are now represented in your brains. So by using those patterns, we can predict what you're going to do. So how do we measure this stuff? This is, of course, what we ask ourselves. And this is how we solve it. Here you have the task to say whether this second word is a word, yes or no. And you are primed with an image or a word. Now, your task is just to say, is this a word, yes or no? And based on the reaction time, we can tell whether the previous stimulus did activate the latter stimulus. Okay, so you see this picture, BW Beetle, kind of fun. And if you can then react more quickly to the word fun, that means that this automatically activated the concept of fun, making it more easy for you to say that that is a word, and hence those two are strongly related. This is how we can see whether marketing stimuli are indeed affecting you in the predictable way or in the way that, that our clients want you to react. And this is extremely important when it comes to the effectiveness of marketing stimuli. So here you see an ad. It really doesn't matter what this says, but it's an ad for sunscreen. And this was a study by, I think, Chow Min, 2010, where basically what he did was he checked, okay, you have this concept of traffic sign and suntan lotion. So this is the product that is promoted, and this is the imagery used to promote it. Now you see all these different associations coming out here, right? So a traffic sign is associated with those items, etc. And I've marked the ones that have an overlap between the concept and what you see. So it's basically this stuff is getting activated, and how much overlap does it have with the product. And he was able to show that the greater this overlap is, so really quantifying how many associations of the underlying marketing stimulus are congruent with the product, the more people were able to remember the ad, and thus the more effective it was. And this happens all the time. Like, this is soap. This is Dove soap. I don't know whether I'm too old or you still remember. Do you remember this ad where there was like, it's like milk, and then there's like a flow? Yeah, good. I think it's a very iconic image. So you see it actually coming out here a little bit. So the soap is coming out of the milk. What is milk? What is white? You've seen it before. You actually associated the white teeth with soap. White is clean, is pure, is all those good things. And obviously soap should make you clean and kind of, not really make you white unless you are in Asia or something. But yeah, here you definitely want just the cleanliness. And there's obviously more stuff going on, right? What is this dove doing there? It's it's a light animal. It's a cute animal. Most people would say. But most people, when they buy this in the shop, they cannot smell the soap. Yet they immediately get an idea of how this is likely to smell. And this is very interesting because we make those assumptions about stuff that we see all the time. Which one of these two roses do you think smells more? Who says the one on the left? And who says the one on the right? So that's, except you, it's basically everyone. But of course, it's not true. I mean, you don't know. Because the reason why you say that is because stronger colors are associated with stronger things and also stronger smells. While in fact, our smelling accuracy, not so good. There's actually a big difference between an odorant, which is the chemical stuff that is in a bottle, and an odor, like for example from a banana. And they have done these studies where you blindfold people and you give them an apple, a banana, all these things. And as you can see here, people are just terrible. They're just terrible and discerning based on the smell alone what something is. The one thing that they can do, luckily, is to say whether something is pleasant or unpleasant. But except that, they're really bad. So what you have seen with the roses too is then this context effect. So imagine I have not mine. So I found some old sports socks, right? And I put them in a container, but I put a lid on it that is permeable to the smell, but you cannot see what's inside. And then I tell you, oh, check this out. I just got this great cheese. What do you think of it? Right? And people would say, oh, maybe it's lovely. But when I tell them, well, check out, my sports socks, or this is how my, yeah, not mine again. Obviously, they're going to be disgusted. The same smell, but you can really interpret it in different ways. And now imagine again what would have happened if I first would have told you how I was just, I was just in Italy. I would show you all these pictures of the Colosseum in Rome, and then give you that bowl and tell you, hey, what do you think this is? again, very likely people would say that's cheese because that is associated with Italy. And this can work in miraculous ways. For example, anyone familiar with this brand? So they had a batch of these going out that were completely mislabeled. So they actually had the purple stuff in there, but it was supposed to be yellow. And people, and they were freaking out because it was like 100,000 units, and I estimate here. And they were afraid that people would just call in, be super outraged, and they had like 2 or 3 people at total calling in and saying, wait, what's in there? People just interpret what they taste based on what they see. They just didn't notice that something else was in there. But that can be tricky sometimes. If you guys remember the release of New Coke, that was something where they actually tested it with people being blindfolded. And the New Coke was a variant of Coke that was a lot sweeter. They were actually trying to beat Pepsi, and Pepsi is in general sweeter. So they did it, and they found that people loved the new Coke in blind taste tests, so they put it in the Coke, and they sold it, and it was a big flop. People hated it. Why? Because they missed the crucial thing, which was the visual stimulus to tell people what they would expect. And if you drink this and you expect something that is not sweet, and now you get something that is sweet, you don't like it. Whereas if you don't have that visual input and you just have the taste, then it's great Coke. So you really want that congruence. And that's why, obviously, when you have these products that need to give you an idea of what is great about them, you really want to check out what are the associations. So actually, I once had some shower gel. I really hope I'm not the only one. That was smelling of caramel and chocolate, and it was so delicious that I tasted it. And it was terrible. It was just the worst thing ever. That's why I also remember it, because it was so terrible. However, using smells in general is a great idea. This is just a short side note, because I think this is quite smart. Nivea brought out this new Seidenmousse. They're also a client of ours, and they put on this Duftprobe, so basically just a smell tester. So you didn't have to open it, which is good because a foam comes out of here, and that foam, it's messy. But you can just rub that thing and then smell it. And the cool thing is that when you have a stimulus that comes with smell, people can remember it better. So over time, they were less likely to forget a stimulus that had some smell to it. And again, you want people to get these implicit associations and smells also from your advertising, right? So here, for example, can you imagine how this smells? Probably awesome. It's your family. You get this, or at least I get the scent of the Nivea odor. And of course, also flowers in general smell of relationships. I told you in the beginning that if you put them down for your date, or you are asking for the phone number in front of a flower shop, people associate the concept of relationship with flowers. Obviously, you also get the smell benefit, so people won't forget you, if they find the smell at least pleasant. But this is again, how something very common like a flower can be used to change the impact of products, but also of you with regards to other people. Fun fact, by the way, if you ever have to go out and do a study, and you are a woman, by the way, important, and so you're there with your clipboard in the streets, and you want to get people to sign stuff to do the survey, wear a flower in your hair. It has been shown to give you a boost of at least 15% of getting the respondents. Also, by the way, more tan skin. And it doesn't matter whether it's self-tanning or really tan skin, but again, only for women, that helps you get responses. So it's really cool then to see how this fails. And I think it's now quite obvious why we don't have any Colgate ready meals available in the shops. This was actually a thing. They thought, great idea, let's bring out those ready meals. Any idea why this doesn't work? Anyone? You. Do you know why this works or may not work? Why do you think this may not work? Anyone else? Let's just go down the line. How about you? What do you think?
Because you associate Colgate with toothpaste and not with food.
Yeah, pretty simple. So this is savory, this is fresh. Those two things don't match. Like I, ate my shampoo. That's not what people would like to do every day. So again, how do we measure this, right? So now we have this thing that something is creating associations, and you want them to match with your product, with your concept. So the way that we do it is we present people with let's say a bottle with a certain name on it, and then we measure all the responses. So like we carry them for their first impression of the product, and then we can see, based on thousands of people, what are the strongest associations that are formed immediately. And in this visualization that we call synapse mapping, you see the green ones being more strongly represented than a comparative product. So this is flower power. Maybe the other one was just flour. So green is then already better. And you also see the size of the bubble is the frequency, and the size of the link is the association strength. So obviously, you want, for example, to have a strong association between certain concepts. Very often, this could be skin and soft. If you have a product that should make your skin soft, you want that association to be in there. Or if you have a product that makes your skin white, you want that association in there. Or it should protect you against pollutants, etc. So with a technique like this, based on a lot of people, we can now compute what are the immediate automatic associations that you can expect in your consumers to walk away with after they've seen your product casing, or they've seen your product poster or whatever. And now on to this. Does anyone know what this is? So I've done my bachelor's in Amsterdam. So I have read about this flower before, this plant. The question now is, however, because there's different ways of associating things with this flower. I think it's a weed, right? So that's a grass. Yeah. It has flowering buds, I hear. So there's two ways, right? You can either see it as something medical, purposeful, etc., or something that you should go to jail for. They have done an extremely interesting study where they have checked over the years, since the 1970s, how the New York Times was writing about marijuana. So they used marijuana, they checked out all the articles in the New York Times that were mentioning it either in the headline or the first paragraph. And what you see here, superimposed, is the opinion on whether or not marijuana should be legalized. And then here in these clusters, you see basically what are the strongest associates with marijuana based on the headline in the first paragraph. And it's different clusters because there were qualitative differences between those different clusters. Now what you can see, obviously, is that in the beginning, very much drug, right? Drug, and then you see, okay, new drug. So that already suggests, okay, now we're going into the more medicine way. And here in the end, you see indeed the medical marijuana coming out. So this is not a plot showing causation. It's basically just putting the two things next to each other. But I think it is very plausible that you see a representation of, a change in opinion in the way that people associate it when they write about it, when they basically think about it. And this is also very important for brands, of course. So we have done analyses on social media, going a little bit more into the data side now, where we've looked at all the comments that people give to posts for example, a brand like Nivea. And then we checked whether we can predict that people not only comment, but also like the post. And here, now it's not green anymore, but it's blue. But you actually see what are the strongest predictors for people who wrote a comment to also like the post. And one thing that was very strong was the concept of mom. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the brand of Nivea, but in many ways also in their marketing material, and especially for Mother's Day, this association with the family and the brand itself and the cream caring for you, like your caretaker, like your mother, that is emphasized. And what we see here is that there's a good indication that it's a very effective, brand congruent way of communicating. So mentioning this concept of mom in the marketing material just makes people feel like, yeah, of course, it is part of the family, and thus they like the content. And so the funny thing is, when I was younger, I always doubted that small things like this would have any effect. So basically, when I did my first business, I didn't care about the logo. I didn't care about the name. I was like, I'm going to provide all the value and make it great. And it doesn't matter what name or logo it has. But what do you think? Which ones of these two logos, if you just see it, and those are just made up logos, which ones of these do you think is associated with more softer qualities? Anyone thinks the left one would be? The right one? You. It's funny. I think you were one of the fastest to solve the math equations, so I wonder whether you think in different ways or just weird. I don't know. So we'll talk about it later. But you're exactly right. Most people would do this. Most people would say this one is the softer one, and this one is the harsher one. Now, how about these two? To me, at least, basically the same thing, right? So the left one is associated more with the artistic, soft, kind of nice qualities, whereas the other one less so. You do your taxes on a Windows, basically. I think they've now really changed when you look at the products that they're getting out, and not only saying that because we were, I don't know whether you can see that, part of the Microsoft accelerator in Berlin, but they don't pay me to say those things. They have changed, but the logo still remains the same, and I personally think it's an obstacle. I think having squares with such hard edges is not a good idea. Now, again, why do we have these associations? Obviously, we need to know that something that is pointy can be used for pointy things. And that is also an issue when it comes to marketing. Because, for example, that has been found with behavioral eye tracking, many other studies, when you have a similar display, but one has very rough, pointy edges, people don't like that. And I think a good explanation is because people are afraid to get hurt. If something is, you wouldn't let your baby run around with all those pointy edges, right? That's where you get the plastic stuff that makes them round. So something like this is much better. People would be more likely to engage and approach that display because they wouldn't perceive the chance of hurting themselves. Again, it seems weird that such a small thing would make a difference, but once you have thousands of people going into your shop every day, those small differences, even if it's like 2-3% of people that are afraid of this edge, that makes a big difference. Okay. Has anyone heard about this study? No? Oh, good. Well, women, if you are, if you have to decide to go out and whether or not you want to wear the blue or the red dress, wear the red dress. Because the same person dressed blue or red in red is always perceived to be more beautiful and more appealing and more interesting and having more temperament. So, and I say always, right? I mean, it's obviously not, it's like more. And again, it's interesting, and we haven't done the study yet. We're planning to do that for many more things to see the effect of apparel on the perception of a person. But it really seems that showing someone with that color has a strong effect on how people perceive that person. And again, it seems to be also about the intensity, because if you see a car that is red compared to a car that is green, the red one is actually perceived to be faster and to be louder. So yeah, if you don't want to get pulled over, go with a green car. All right, this has been a lot of stuff, and now we're actually going to the portion that in the beginning you said you didn't find that interesting, or the politics stuff. But are there any questions so far regarding anything that I've said? No? How are we with time?
We're good. We have more than 50 minutes.
More than 50 minutes?
Yeah. But we can discuss it at the end. So.
Good. Well, I'm not sure what the density of information is for you guys, whether this is like too much. But is it? Do you feel like this is too much density? Mike?
That's totally perfect. So
It's totally perfect. I like to hear that. All right, cool. So, yes, your first association and something that is can be a pain if you don't like him. Like I don't like him. The question is still, how did this happen? And how could so many people be so wrong? Why could they not see beyond their own bubble? I think one way of looking at this phenomenon is to really look at it more like, brand marketing. Would you buy the brand Trump? And where exactly would it fall in the association network? And there's two principles. And many of them should by now feel familiar to you because I've given you some of the basics for understanding. Mere exposure, word frequency, and word imagery. Now, what does mere exposure mean? It means that it's the general phenomenon in which the more you are exposed to a stimulus, the more you tend to like it. And it's cool because that means that if you are the first at the party and people see you more, they will think you are more beautiful and that you are nicer. And at the same time, if you see someone more on TV or in the newspapers, etc., you think he must be more important. So if you look at the bought versus free media, you can see that Mr. Trump had a huge advantage because he was so outrageous. He was able to capture the attention, and people would sometimes even film his podium with him not even being there because they thought that whatever he would have to say would be so interesting, would drive anger, which drives clicks, and hence they pointed the camera at it. So overall, his exposure was higher, and thus his presence in most people's heads was bigger. I mean, you could have also associated Hillary Clinton with the US, but I don't think any one of you did. And the other cool thing that happens when you are on TV is that you get a lot of benefits, because who is on TV? Famous people, important people, people that have something to say. And then, of course, you can control the frame. So you can put those flags in the background. So that's nationalism, patriotism, strong nation, etc. Very often, the camera points at the person at the podium from below. So basically, he is now on top, like a king, and you are the peasant that is allowed to listen to him. And you also get the authority association from the network. So if he's on C-SPAN, PBS, whatever it is, you get associated with the authority of that channel as well. It's like, if your painting is next to Picasso, like it doesn't really matter. People would think, it doesn't matter how good it looks, but people would think, if it's here, it must be really good. The TV is very powerful in, making people famous and making people sticky. And this goes very far. Anyone know who this is? You know who it is? Who is it? It's Dr. House. Is Dr. House a doctor? No. But would you buy painkillers if Dr. House would have an ad on TV telling you that these painkillers really help? What is it? His leg? What is he? His leg? The answer is yes. Yes, you would. Well, okay, you wouldn't. You're shaking your head. But most people would, because you associate him with being a doctor. And very often what they do in these ads is they just put someone in a white lab coat because the white lab coat is associated with being a doctor. And that already, makes you think, okay, doctor, authority figure, he has painkillers to sell, so you buy them. So you got these effects just with a mere exposure. And in this example, we liken Mr. Trump to milk, so the milk won. The other very predictable way of influencing people successfully, just on the brain level, is word frequency. Because if you may have seen this, Trump doesn't talk like Kerry or an academic in any way. No, in fact, he's down there. He uses extremely simple language, very short sentences, very high frequency words, very simple grammar, very often, wrong grammar, but it's the words are already so simple that you cannot miss his points. What was his slogan?
Make America great again.
And what was Hillary's slogan? So yes, make America great again. What a great slogan. It was stolen, but it uses super frequent words, very easy to understand. There's no, what does this mean question here. And Hillary's claim, by the way, was stronger together, which she even changed in her campaign. So she wasn't even consistent with that slogan. But it's a terrible slogan. Nobody of you remembered it. It has long words, not frequent words. It's very abstract words. If you ever play, what is it? This game where you have to like guess words or have to pantomime words. Well, try using abstract words like honor. They are extremely difficult to pantomime. So don't use them in your political campaign or your advertising. That should actually be a rule. So if you can pantomime the words in your advertising, it's probably a good word. And you can also see this in other very successful brands like Head & Shoulders. Anyone know what Head & Shoulders is for? You know?
Yeah, I know the German word, but the English word I don't know.
Oh yeah, it's dandruff. It's a weird word. Yeah, so Schuppen. Yeah. So where are those things? They're basically between the head and the shoulders, right? I mean, and also head and shoulders are very concrete words. You know what a head is, you know what shoulders are. They make sense with the concept. And again, remember what I've shown you before, this overlap between the concept and the brand and the advertising. The higher it is, the easier to know, okay, I have this thing between my head and shoulders, let me get Head and Shoulders. And you can test this quite easily. So obviously we want to tell our clients, how on earth can you test this? And it's very similar to the Trump slogan. The question is, how often do we need to show it to you before you remember? So what we do is we show it to you and ask you whether you remember it. Pretty simple. It's a bit more complicated because what you want to model is long-term memory. You have been exposed to Trump for a long time. In a questionnaire, maybe you have 15, maybe you have 20 minutes. We do all of them online. So what we have to do is to simulate forgetting. And the way that you simulate forgetting is similar to what you've done in the beginning, where there was more interference in the middle part. Remember? First things was easy, last things was easy. The stuff in the middle is difficult. So what we actually do is we flush people's memory with a word puzzle. It's basically, you telling someone a telephone number, and while they try to rehearse it and write it down, you just blurt out random numbers. That's going to make it very difficult for them to write down that number because you have interference. So what we do is we impose interference with very similar, with words that then occupy the verbal loop in your brain and hence make it very difficult to rehearse the stimulus. So only if it was super simple, if it was a Head and Shoulders or what is it, silk clear? No, silk, it will stick. And then you can see after this procedure, do people recall it? And they usually recall the more frequent, the more concrete words that also make sense within the concept. And the make sense within the context is actually interesting because having a concept to guide your thoughts is basically like the stimulus of, this is happening in America, or this is a red rose. It helps you to find what you're looking for. It's basically building the framework for you to find a certain memory. Does that make sense? I should put that on a slide. Anyways, in terms of word frequency, again, Trump has been using these super simple words. He just needs to say them once or twice. Obviously, he gets the benefit from being on TV all the time, but because they're so simple to process, they just are accepted as being good and true more easily. Remember when you thought that the school shooting was more prevalent? You were wrong, but you accepted it as true because it was easier to think of. So this again is the same principle. If it's easier to think of, it's easier to accept. Now lastly, word imagery. Now, Hillary Clinton would use words like, stronger together or agreeable to describe a person, whereas Trump would use a word like sweet. So, yeah, after everything I've told you, sweet obviously is better. It is way more frequent. It is creating, at least for me, a lot of positive imagery. It's a sweet candy. I actually get the taste of sweetness on my tongue when I see that word. So in many respects, creates a story that is much richer in experience, that helps me then to remember better what the point was, that it was a sweet person. That person immediately gets an aura of sweetness. Whereas an agreeable person, I don't know, like I cannot pantomime it, so what do I care? So we ended up with Trump, who I think was very effective in, with the repetition, with using simple words, using words that were very easy to imagine, and again, using associations to his advantage that way. We don't know whether something horrible will happen with him yet, but we know that this guy was responsible for going to war in Iraq and Afghanistan. Many believe not for the right reasons or any reasons. So I will now give you one of the things that I think Bush did well in order to convince the nation to go to war. And I hope that given everything that you have learned in terms of associations, beginning and end, etc., you will find it easy to look at his State of the Union address and understand why, and this is crucial, he was able to associate Iraq with Saddam Hussein and 9/11. Because he was actually asked at a press conference, why did you equate Saddam Hussein with 9/11, or why did you think that he was responsible? And Bush actually said, I've never done that. And he was right. He has never explicitly put those two things together. He never ever said Saddam Hussein was responsible for 9/11. Yet so many people in the nation put those two things together, and they put all their anger into then going to war with Iraq. The big question is, of course, why? And I think the answer is in here. So please read this and then make up your mind why you think this is effective in achieving the goal of connecting those two things, Saddam Hussein and 9/11. Did you guys get it? We have some technical difficulties. But also, we see here, because I've now just marked them, right? So this is the premise. Remember primacy recency effect? That's the first thing. So okay, this is about 9/11, this paragraph. And you can already see that he tries to put Saddam Hussein very close to it, and then also the paragraph closes with it. Many in the world believe that Saddam Hussein could be contained. Now, what on earth does that mean? It doesn't mean that he was responsible for, but it appears that many in the world, so then you have the social pressure. If many people believe it, then it can be wrong, right? A million Big Macs sold must mean that they at least don't kill you. So very, very smart to put these two things here together. And now he opens up. Now he's not talking about him anymore, but he's talking about all these terrible things. He sandwiches in all the evil in between 9/11 and Saddam Hussein. I mean, look at all these things: chemical agents, etc., shadowy terrorist networks. Honestly, which terrorist network gets better if it's shadowy? And then again, in the end, he closes with Saddam Hussein. So that's the recency effect. All the associations, what fires together, wires together, is put in here to let you go home with these neurons, these concepts, Saddam Hussein, 9/11, all that bad stuff being active at the same time. So then the next time, then I say, after you just reading this, I say Saddam Hussein, you're like, well, bad things, all these bad associations, and had something to do with 9/11. But he didn't say it. So I think it is very important to be very vigilant of these things happening, because they happen to all of us all the time. And there are people who understand how this works, and they're using it on us. They can use it like this. So you have refugees, and you can print a picture that tells a certain story that can really highlight the hardship that they have to go through and their humanity. Presidents kiss babies for a reason, and he's holding one because he needs shelter, he needs help. It's a baby, it cannot survive on its own, and he obviously cares for him. So this picture has a very positive image and very positive associations with refugees. But I can also print a picture like this, which is less positive and will very likely invoke a lot of fears. I think one of the most troublesome associations that exist currently is the one with Muslims. Because Muslim terrorists is something, I mean, yes, there's Christian terrorists, there's Muslim terrorists, but if you think Muslim or terrorist, those are connected. Even though that the actual evidence may show that those two things are not more prevalent than other types of terrorism, or even if you look at right-wing motivated attacks in the US, I believe those were more prevalent than Muslim attributable attacks. But those things don't matter. What matters is what people think and feel. And people currently think this. So again then, how can we know? How can we know what's going on when we talk about politics, opinions regarding marijuana, selling a product, or what people associate with positive traits when you go on a date? We believe that big data puts everything into context. Because why do you think, or why do we think that flowers mean relationships? Why do we think that soap is clean, that white is clean? Or why do we think what Muslims are and what they are capable of doing? Again, we look at the brain, but this time we look at all the information that is out there. This stuff that has made you think, make you associate certain things with each other. So it's kind of scary, I think, because if you would give me or someone with a lot of computational power access to your computer, access to your Facebook, to your email, to your Instagram, to Snapchat or whatever you guys use, those kind of things, that person would be so capable in predicting who you are and what you will do, likely better than you yourself can. Because you yourself, you're actually trapped in your own brain. You have this illusion of everything being so simple and you're so rational, and you don't realize how you're influenced all the time, how you're primed all the time. But the algorithms don't care about that. I personally did a study back in the days, 2013, where I predicted how much people like each other based on their Facebook communication, their private Facebook communication. And it was really, well, first of all, the people you write more with, you like more. There are certain words that people use. There's a lot with actually language synchronicity. So if people start talking similarly, they like each other more. So if you have good friends, you have inside jokes, you have things like that, and that is usually a good indicator of two people liking each other. But that is private communication. Everything that you put out, the stuff that you post, the likes that you have, very indicative of who you are. Actually, it seems that people believe that Trump has used this as well. Have you guys read this article about his big data approach to making Hillary voters not vote and Trump voters to vote? No? So in Stanford, there's a group, and they have over 100,000 personality profiles, and they've matched them with Facebook-like profiles, basically figuring out that if you like the Colbert Report or the Daily Show, you're more left, you're more liberal, you're probably going to vote for Hillary Clinton. If you like curly fries, you probably have a high IQ, and a couple of other things. By the way, this is interesting. The curly fries have nothing to do with IQ. Like, you cannot now start eating curly fries and get really smart. The reason why this association exists is because apparently at one time someone liked curly fries, and that person had a more than average IQ. Then all of his friends saw that and they also liked it. So basically that like in that social layer, was more prevalent, and hence it was an indicator, even though it had nothing to do with the actual object. It was kind of a social artifact. But you can now predict the gender, the sexual orientation, your personality based on those like profiles. With some higher predictability, like the Colbert Report, which by the way I love, that is a very good indicator of being more liberal. So the story went that Trump has used this to specifically target people like that, like Hillary Clinton voters, and then feed them fake news that, for example, would make them doubt that Hillary Clinton was a good candidate, very directly, in the hope that they would not go vote. And then, of course, you can also strengthen people that are likely Trump voters to make sure that they go to vote. I'm not too sure how effective that was in the end, but it is certainly reality right now, that if you are online and people know, because there's a lot of public information already and the cookies and everything that you have out there, people already know those things. I didn't want to be such of a downer, by the way. This is kind of negative, but it's also interesting in the sense that it enables us to get the status quo. Okay, so by using big data and all of these insights, we can now really start predicting behavior in very interesting ways. So for example, memory associations and brand fit. Because really looking out there and figuring out what color should be on your product, should you use an image of a feather or a dove or, I don't know, what else is light? A pillow? Things, what is the best visual code to be associated with being soft? That you can basically get from all the data that is out there. So if you look at large corpi on Wikipedia, the New York Times, etc., you can see what most people currently think about when you say the word America, when you talk about soft things, etc. And remember what I did when I gave you this Friends sports socks, but I introduced it with the Italian Colosseum. You think it's cheese. Again, when you look at these two images, you for some reason think that the right one smells more strongly. When you see this, you think it's soft soap. It all comes down to all these associations, to the match between what you're selling, what the concept is, what you believe the consumer wants, and how much everything on this picture influences it. And it's really funny, because I think one of the most important things to keep in mind here is that people always use all the knowledge available to make a decision. So when you ask for a phone number in front of a flower shop, the information that is available are those flowers, and those associations will play a role. When you shop for wine and you have no idea about wine, what are you going to go with? Right? You're going to go for a price and maybe whether or not there's an animal on the bottle, which both things have no influence on the taste, I would assume. I mean, and they've tested this in the scanner. When you have no knowledge about a wine, but you tell the participant that this wine is very expensive, you actually see that in their brain, they enjoy that wine more. Because they have no other information to go with, they assume that it is good, and something's good is more enjoyable, so they enjoy more. It's a treat. And I'm saying that because you have to keep in mind, is your marketing kind of a one-off? Will this be all the information, or will it be more complex? We work a lot with FMCG, so that is very fast-moving, fast-changing. You get a couple of interactions for a new product, you try to establish it, and then it stays fixed. Fixed in certain ways, but the brand kind of has found a niche. So that is more immediate thought processes. When you consider buying a car, there's many more things that are important. So for FMCG, you want the process to be very easy, to be high frequent words, concrete words, easy to process, because then it's easy to remember and kind of really show this effectiveness. For things that are more complicated, like cars, or even other products that are where you need more explanation, it can sometimes be good to actually make it harder for people to process. So they've done tests where a more expensive, what was it? I think it was face cream, sold better if the price was printed in a font that was difficult to read, because that made people, they had to process it more, and that processing depth was better for a product that needed more processing. Where something that, bottled soap, shampoo, where you just wanted to sell it quickly, then it can be advantageous to be very, very easy to process. So everything that I've told you so far, you really need to put into the context. What do you want your consumer to do? And of course, it always makes sense to look at the fundamental context of where you're already working in. What, again, are the associations that you should use for your brand? All right. This was all basically the fundamentals of how I see the world and how we approach the world, and really spanning all these different aspects. But when we go out and we test stuff, of course, we need to be very, very practical. So we do online studies, we do the data crunching, and we do the results. For example, we test visual content like this. And by now, I think you would, don't find it too surprising that the things that we do then is we use implicit behavior tasks that really figure out what are the associations for our target audience that are the strongest associated with the new stimulus, right? Is this fun, yes or no? You can still ask explicit questions because people have some concept of what they want or whether or not something, for example, fits the brand. It works better usually when the image is evoking positive emotions, but that's actually, so there's more things in there, of course. But explicit questions are still good for some portions. And then, of course, the big data analysis helps you to really put everything into context and see whether this color is already a good color, whether putting trees in the background is a good idea, etc. But in the end, what our clients want is really making a decision. Very often, they have a couple of ideas, like the stimuli, and they just don't know on which one they should spend 100 million to put it out there worldwide to make people believe that the new car has the certain trait. And I say it very nonchalantly, but it's really important here to stress, I think, that what the companies are trying to do is really fit the needs of the consumers more, right? So they have focus groups that tell them people want this. And now the big question for us and for the media agencies and creative agencies is to translate that, what the people say they want, into something that they understand as the thing that they want. The Beetle is fun. So people need to understand that it is fun. Not all of them will drive it, so they have to get the funness from the stimulus. So you can do that for all the pictures. We obviously also do it for words. For words, you have many interesting avenues in terms of looking at pre-existing associations in the language, right? So for example, what is fun also associated with, and could you use maybe a different word for fun to make it more salient? And again, we just tell our clients what words should you use in your claim or as your brand that really has the associations that match the concept and are also overall positive and thereby triggering the purchase intent. This also works for prices. Prices are, again, just one other information point. Very, very similar approach. But what is interesting here is that when you talk specifically about purchase intent and prices, you can really dive very deep into the data analysis to figure out what are the exact things that make something sell. What is the exact word that you should use? What is the exact image that you should use in order to increase purchase intent by a couple of percentage points? So we do benchmarking as well, which is extremely efficient for things like memory because they are very well established benchmarks for what is easy to process and what is not. And you already get a lot of information from frequency norms, concreteness ratings, etc. But basically, what clients really want to see is how does this slide in? Is the thing that I'm currently doing really better than the market average, yes or no? Or compared to the other material that was tested in the same study. Alrighty. So the business stuff is basically we, as NeuroFlash, we do online experiments and analysis based on representative consumer samples. Really applying everything that I've just told you, that in my eyes is really the fundamental basis of most of our processing of this world, and hence also processing of marketing stimuli. To get there, we use these cognitive experiments, put it in the context of big data analysis. So our clients just give us their type of stimulus, and we, based on the consumer sample, give them the results and really tell them what works, why, and how they could maybe make it better. One of the fascinating, and now we come to the resolution of the clouds in the background. One of the really interesting projects we're currently working on is making this very practical. Really saying, okay, you want your concept, you want your product concept to match what the consumer wants and all the elements of your marketing material to make sense. We have an engine where you can basically put in your concepts and we can compute a network that shows you what are the things that are high frequency, concrete, and very closely related to what you want to say, and thereby automatically hitting those concepts. People don't need to think about whether a couch is soft. They can already feel the softness because there's something on the image that makes them feel the softness. So if you do this for what I've given you in the beginning, you can see that if you look at couch and softness, cloud, and also roundness, remember the round logos, those things are strongly associated. And hence, we recommend using clouds as part of the marketing stimulus to automatically get people this idea of clouds working. So then, clouds are great. When we think about all the personal stuff, I hope that you should walk away with, put a flower in your hair if you want to do a survey, or use flowers, flower shop, or bring your girlfriend flowers. Definitely something that will get all the positive associations on your side. For marketing, a couple of things. So this is an ad for Vaseline. I think it's really good because it is very simple. There's the problem, there's the solution. You get from A to B, obviously with Vaseline. And again, from what I've told you so far, it's really smart to use high frequency and concrete words that are easy to process, hence to remember, and hence are more readily accepted as true. I hope that with all that knowledge, we won't end up in a world where everybody talks like Trump, right? Obviously, when you use more complex language, also people think that you are smarter. They may not think that you are as convincing, but with enough time, being smart can be really an asset. We are working with a lot of big companies, and what we truly believe is that using the right associations is the key, and we can help you measure those associations and ensure that you use the most effective one. Because if you want your consumers to spend more cash, use NeuroFlash. Thank you very much.